Burning wreckage fills the screen on Serbian television.
As Yugoslavia claims it has shot down a NATO plane during Operation Allied Force. And while Belgrade is talking, NATO is not.
Thanks for joining us in our special report on the strike against Yugoslavia. I'm Joey Chen at CNN Center in Atlanta.
And I'm Frank Sesno in Washington. Over the next hour, during our special report, we will look at the reported downing of a U.S. plane about 30 miles west of Belgrade. We will have reports from CNN correspondents in the Balkans, at NATO headquarters, and at the Pentagon. And we'll look at other problems in Kosovo, the alleged growing atrocities against ethnic Albanians, and the stream of refugees. We begin with the latest on that NATO plane. Serbian television has been showing what it claims is a stealth F-117A Nighthawk from Holloman Air Force Base in New Mexico, shot down by Yugoslav forces. The plane reportedly went down about 6 hours ago. The location and the status of the pilot from the one-person plane is unknown. The Yugoslav government says a manhunt is underway. The reported downing came during the 4th day of Operation Allied Force.
This incident reportedly occurred about 30 miles, 40 kilometers west of Belgrade. CNN's Brent Sadler is in the Yugoslav capital, joins us now again by telephone. Brent.
Thanks, Joey. The Yugoslav authorities claim the F-117 stealth fighter was shot down over the area about 30 miles west of Belgrade some 6 hours ago. The pilot, as you say, is unaccounted for, and Yugoslav forces say they are now engaged in a manhunt. If he is alive and if he's caught, they say, the pilot will be treated humanely. This incident came on the day the Yugoslav military claimed its air defenses, largely inactive since the start of NATO airstrikes 4 days ago, were good enough to shoot down an attacking warplane. The Allied strikes are shifting to ground attacks against Yugoslav forces in Kosovo, phase 2 of the campaign. But while the NATO attack plan is set to concentrate on Kosovo, targets around the Yugoslav capital remain in NATO sight. If it's confirmed the U.S. stealth was shot down by Yugoslav air defenses, NATO planes would appear to be under serious threat. Joey.
Frank, can you talk briefly about the kind of coverage the local television has given this particular incident there?
Yes, we're now seeing the pictures of what's claimed to be the wreckage of the F-117. It was first shown on Serbian television, shown extensively, repeated many, many times, very early into the morning, Belgrade time here. It came on the day that the Yugoslav authorities had said during a military press conference earlier on the same day that their air defenses, even after 4 days of airstrikes, were certainly good enough to shoot down a NATO plane. And then just a few hours later, these pictures came up on Serbian television claiming that air defenses had successfully shot down the Stealth, one of the top planes in NATO's arsenal of aircraft involved in the airstrikes against Yugoslavia. Joey.
CNN's Brent Sadler on the line with us from Belgrade.
Now, we want to tell you that we're now hearing that there will be a briefing from Pentagon spokesman Ken Bacon in about a half an hour from now. When that takes place, CNN obviously will take you there live to hear what the Pentagon is saying. It will be the Pentagon's first comment since this story broke. Now, throughout these last few hours, reporters at NATO headquarters in Brussels have been pressing for more information about that Serbian television report. CNN's Mike Betzer is there. Mike, is NATO ready to confirm or deny anything tied to this report at this hour?
It's still not yet, but I assume they will have some announcement that will coincide with Mr. Bacon's announcement. They've, at SHAPE headquarters in Mons, which is about 60 miles south of here, Supreme headquarters, Allied powers in Europe, the NATO central nerve system for this operation going on in Yugoslavia. They've been trying to get all the information they can together, and they promised us that they're going to give us a statement as well, and I assume that it will come out simultaneously in about 30 minutes or so, coordinated with Mr. Bacon's statement. Now, this happens as NATO moved from phase 1 of their operation to phase 2. Phase 1, of course, was attacking the military infrastructure of Yugoslavia, to soften up Yugoslavia. Phase 2 was designed to be more specifically aimed at Kosovo, at going after troop concentrations, armored columns, artillery, those sorts of things which are being used in an offensive against the Albanian Kosovars in Kosovo. Now, earlier today, NATO spokesman Jamie Shea said that NATO realized the threat that this new phase presents.
I've never sought to minimize the risks involved in any operation of this kind, but we feel that it is essential now to move to this broader range of air operations to show President Milosevic that we mean what we say when we say that we are going to stop his ability to carry out war against his own people. And naturally, he will be feeling the effect very quickly indeed.
Overall, NATO rates the success of this four-day operation as very high, despite these reports of the shoot-down. They say it's been a success.
Mike, do they give you some kind of quantification on what Phase 2 is going to be all about? How many more sorties and that sort of thing?
I think that what we have to make clear is that Phase 1 and Phase 2 will be going on simultaneously, basically, but Phase 1 was designed to knock out those air defense systems that could get our aircraft that are operating in the Kosovo theater there. Could be the same amount of sorties. I really don't have specific information on that, but the focus of some of these other aircraft which have been attacking the infrastructure will go towards attacking these troop concentrations, artillery and such, and different types of aircraft like A-10 tank busters.
Mike Fetcher in Brussels, thanks. Joey?
All the F-117s used in Operation Allied Force have been working out of Aviano Air Base in northern Italy. You know, Jim Bitterman is there. Jim, is the operation over for the night?
Well, Joey, we've been watching just in the last few seconds, and you may be able to hear in the background some of the returning aircraft from tonight's missions. The base here is not saying any one way or the other whether any of their aircraft are missing. They won't confirm the reports that the F-117 was down in Yugoslavia tonight. We did see, however, earlier this evening, two stealth fighters, two F-117s leaving here. The F-117s have been used every night of the bombing campaign. There were 10 that took off the first night, used because of their radar evading capability and ability to stealthily get into the Yugoslav airspace and attack the air defense installations. The question now is how this is going to play out among pilots if it's confirmed true that this F-117, the most sophisticated airplane that the Air Force has been shot down, how it will play among the pilots here at the base. Earlier this evening, before the reports came out, we were able to talk to some of those pilots about how they view their mission so far.
And I think we could defend ourselves very well against anything that he might do, but it certainly would make it a little more intense in the flying if he decided to start using some of this surface threats. We have not seen near the anti-aircraft weaponry employed that we thought we would see, but we're not sure that that's just not a tactic that he may be using to husband his weaponry and then use it at a point when he thinks he can surprise us. But I can tell you that's not going to happen. I mean, every mission we go out on, we're ready for the worst, and we don't slack up at all in our defenses.
Some of the pilots here at Aviano who have been confident but cautious so far. Joy?
Jim, on that point, the level of confidence, these are folks who have a great deal of confidence in this particular aircraft. It has done well in the past, and this is really the top class of pilots operating these jets.
Absolutely, yeah. The F-117s, these pilots are really the best pilots in the Air Force. They're chosen because this plane is a very sophisticated plane, one of the more sophisticated and top secret planes that the United States has. So it only entrusts this plane to some of its best pilots. It'll be a question to see how this plays against the other pilots, or with the other pilots in the base, because of the fact that this is a plane that's viewed as somewhat invincible. It's gotten through several air campaigns, including the one in Iraq, and several attacks in Iraq, very successfully, and proved to be a very successful weapon. If indeed it proves that the F-117 was shot down, and it's not all that clear that it was shot down, or that it's even an F-117 that is shown in those pictures, in any case, if it is proven that it was shot down, that will probably will take some confidence here among the other pilots who are flying less stealthy aircraft. Joyce?
CNN's Jim Bitterman reporting to us from Aviano Air Base in Italy.
Here in Washington, we're joined now by CNN's senior White House correspondent, Wolf Blitzer. Wolf, you've been talking to your sources throughout the evening. What are they saying?
What they're saying, Frank, is that the Pentagon, the State Department, the White House, they're reluctant to say anything confirming or denying. But one top U.S. official does tell CNN that, in his words, the picture speaks for itself, meaning those pictures that we've been seeing on Serbian television are, in fact, from the U.S. perspective, that F-117A stealth fighter that went down. It is unclear, I'm told, by well-placed sources, whether this was a shoot-down by Serbian surface-to-air missiles or whether it was a technical problem, some malfunction that could have brought down this 117. All those questions are obviously still under investigation. The fate of the missing pilot, of course, remains very much on the minds of U.S. officials. That's why there's been no official confirmation. They're very anxious to try to make sure that before they say or do anything in public, they know precisely where that pilot is.
All right, well, Flitzer, thanks very much. We want to go now over to the Pentagon for reaction from there. CNN's Gene Meserve stands by. Gene, what are you hearing there?
Well, Frank, as you've mentioned, there's going to be a briefing here in about 20 minutes' time. That will be a refreshing change. Until now, the information flow at the Pentagon has been choked off. Choked off, we are told, by NATO commanders in Europe. Pentagon officials have said as little as possible, and when they have spoken, they have been as non-committal as possible. There has been no official confirmation of a shoot-down, and yet there has been no denial either, only the statement that Wolf cited a minute ago, that the pictures speak for themselves. If there has indeed been a shoot-down, the first concern would be, of course, the pilot. The second would be the aircraft and its super-secret technology.
NATO is now gunning directly for the approximately 10,000 Serbian troops and special police reportedly responsible for the looting, pillaging, and murder of ethnic Albanians in Kosovo.
We need to be able to go against those forces in Kosovo, those units, those tanks, those heavy weapons, which are responsible for the shelling of villages and all the suffering we see.
NATO aircraft will fly lower and slower in the more dangerous Phase 2 of its operation, intended to make Serbian forces pay what one senior U.S. official called a heavy price. One NATO military source says commanders believe 3 nights of airstrikes have damaged Yugoslav air defenses to a sufficient level and that there will be minimal risk to NATO personnel. This despite the fact that bad weather hampered Friday's strikes. With their laser-guided bombs useless in heavy cloud cover, some NATO aircraft returned to base with their payloads intact. The weather is expected to be a factor again tonight, but satellite-guided weapons can operate in any weather conditions, and even before darkness fell Saturday, at least 2 cruise missiles had been fired from U.S. ships in the Adriatic. In light of the dire situation in Kosovo, there have been calls in some quarters for NATO to commit ground troops. Even the former Supreme Allied Commander says the option should be seriously considered.
I think it will send a very strong message to President Milosevic that we are indeed serious about not only an air campaign, but putting that together in a combined campaign plan with the ground force. And if we can do that, it may assist in getting us to perhaps a negotiated settlement.
But in top NATO and U.S. government circles, there clearly is no appetite for a high-risk ground offensive. Assistant Secretary of Defense Ken Bacon issued a statement saying the United States has no intention of sending ground troops to fight in Kosovo, and the Department of Defense is not doing any planning that would enable such a deployment.
And CNN has just received a very important piece of news. The pilot of that F-117 has now been rescued. We expect further details in about 15 minutes' time at Ken Bacon's briefing. Frank?
Gene, let me stop before we move on there, because that is a very important piece of news, a major development that just came to you as a piece of paper this very moment.
No, not as a piece of paper. It was whispered in my ear by one of our very competent producers here at the Pentagon.
So we've been talking with sources there.
That's right, very high-ranking sources.
So to recap then, the pilot, we are being told, has been rescued.
Has been rescued,
And
yes.
we will hear from Ken Bacon in about 15 minutes' time from the Pentagon.
That's absolutely correct.
All right,
we'll be here.
Okay, let us recap for our audience then. This F-117 that was shot down about 30 miles, or the wreckage that was spotted and identified by Serb television about 30 miles out of Belgrade. We've been talking about that, seeing that throughout the evening. Apparently major development. We're now hearing from top sources at the Pentagon that the pilot has been rescued, be a very dramatic development, and we will be hearing from Ken Bacon, the spokesman over at the Pentagon, in about 15 minutes' time, presumably with that news and a great deal of detail. CNN will, of course, take you there live. Our coverage, of course, continues.
Okay.
Also ahead in our continuing coverage of the strike against Yugoslavia, Kosovo's refugees. Thousands are fleeing the province as reports of atrocities are on the rise. We'll have the latest on that. And we'll interview Fred Abrahams of Human Rights Watch when we return.
Now, the CNN website ranked #1 on the World Wide Web, with more users than any other general news site on the net. For the latest breaking news, business, sports, weather, and more, get it all at CNN.com.
The promise of the internet is not in the future. It's now. The bandwidth to change everything. Ride the light.
Oh, come on, you can't stay another day? There he is. I wish I could. I'm just so crazy with the new job. I didn't have time to figure out my finances. We went through the same thing when we got this house. And with the new baby coming, we need his help. So what'd you guys do? Called Zero Price. Really? It was great. It really helped simplify things. Give him a call. Yeah, well, what a big brother's for, right? Come on, get out of there, you. Bye-bye. Bye. All right.
Zero Price, helping people invest with confidence for over 60 years.
The best things in life just come naturally. Like natural vitamin E from A to N. Made from the healthy goodness of soybeans, you'll find it in many leading brands of dietary supplements. Studies have shown that natural vitamin E is significantly more effective than synthetic brands.
This is CNN Breaking News.
I'm Frank Sesno in Washington, where just a few minutes ago, our correspondent Gene Meserve at the Pentagon reported, quoting senior officials in the U.S. administration, that the pilot of the F-117A stealth fighter, you see here apparently in flames, according to Serbian television, has been rescued. Again, the pilot has been rescued. A $45 million plane, a one-seat fighter. We will get more details on exactly what took place, but we are told a very substantial search and rescue operation was launched after that plane went down. That certainly would account for the virtual radio silence that was maintained at NATO headquarters in Brussels and at the Pentagon itself. We are expecting the Pentagon spokesman, as I mentioned, Ken Bacon, to be coming out and talking to us, briefing us, and giving some information as to exactly what may have transpired in just a few short minutes. Our senior White House correspondent, Wolf Blitzer, has been talking to sources as well. And Wolf, now that we've got word that the pilot has been rescued, a little bit more detail is going to become soon apparent to us.
Well, it certainly explains, Frank, why all of this silence from official sources at NATO headquarters in Brussels and here in Washington at the Pentagon, at the White House, at the State Department. There was a very intensive search and rescue operation that was immediately launched once this F-117 was downed, whether it was downed as a result of a malfunction or a surface-to-air missile, some sort of hostile activity. All of those details will be made known very, very soon. But at this point, we can report that U.S. officials, military officials, NATO officials, their primary concern was to capture, to try to locate that pilot, make sure that he was safe. There are all sorts of sophisticated means that U.S. Air Force pilots have to try to present themselves, including beepers and beacons. And in this particular case, this rescue operation now has been successful. We'll be getting those details momentarily.
And Wolf, I think it's certainly safe to say that this sort of eventuality of a plane going down is something the administration, the president, political leaders, military leaders have been trying to prepare the public for. They don't always have happy outcomes, but it certainly reinforces the sense of real-world danger that surrounds a mission such as this.
Well, this was always a major risky operation for NATO pilots. The Yugoslav air defense system, very sophisticated, much more sophisticated, for example, than the Iraqi air defense system. The Yugoslav system was not used very effectively, not used much at all during the first 3 days of the bombing. Some U.S. Defense Department officials were suggesting they were husbanding, they were saving their best equipment, although we are told that today they were much more active. The radar equipment, the surface-to-air missile batteries, so-called SAM sites, and as this second phase of the NATO operation today got going, a phase not only going after air defense systems, but after specific targets in Kosovo that could lead to a greater military offensive against the ethnic Albanians in Kosovo. The risks, of course, got more intense.
All right, Wolf, over to the White House now, and White House correspondent Chris Black has been there all day long. Chris, they have not been saying very much where you are, but there's a lot at stake here.
Frank, the lights have been burning right here at the White House, and the anxiety level has been palpable. As you noted, even before this mission began, President Clinton tried to warn the public that it was risky. Today, that operation entered a new phase. The operation entered a new phase. The president has been here at the White House all day monitoring the situation. Members of his national security team have been coming and going. As I said, they haven't told us too much. They've been unusually tight-lipped. It's obvious now why. We could sort of read between the lines, though, of the fact that they were not even providing guidance to us, that there was a great deal of concern about the safety of this pilot. As Wolf learned from one of his sources, the pictures did indeed speak for themselves. There was a lot of concern today for the safety of that pilot, and obviously we're expecting, once the Pentagon makes its report, to hear something from the president himself. Frank?
All right, Chris Black, thanks very much. We'll come back to you, of course. Joey?
Frank, we want to return now to the place where we received most of the information that we have throughout the course of this evening. That is Belgrade, where CNN's Brent Sadler has been talking to Yugoslav authorities, as well as his sources on the ground in Belgrade. He rejoins us now on the telephone. Brent, you've heard these late reports confirmed to CNN that the pilot of that aircraft has been rescued. Is there further word on that here in Belgrade tonight?
No, Jerry, there's no further word. Serbian television here has just been showing demonstrations from a couple of days ago at Skopje in Macedonia. But in terms of the news that the U.S. pilot has been rescued, no response to that. Earlier, when this report was running on Serbian television, we spoke to government sources here, and they said that they had engaged in their own manhunt to try and capture the U.S. pilot. So we await to see what happens from a Pentagon briefing as to how the pilot was rescued and the incident, the circumstances surrounding this wreckage and what happened over the skies of Yugoslavia, and why one of the top aeroplanes in the NATO armory, the U.S. plane, the F-117 Stealth, came to be shot down, presumably by Yugoslav air defenses, unless it had some sort of malfunction and crashed. But until the morning local time here, I don't expect we'll have any more information from the Yugoslav authorities here in Belgrade. Joey.
All right, CNN's Brent Sadler with us again on the line from Belgrade. Frank?
Joey, we have more details as to exactly what took place today. Again, repeating that this pilot has been rescued. We want to go over to, again, our senior White House correspondent, Wolf Blitzer. Wolf, you've been, again, talking to your sources. What are they saying?
Well, Frank, I just spoke with White House Press Secretary Joe Lockhart, who says that President Clinton is enormously pleased, very gratified that this U.S. pilot, the pilot of the F-117A, was rescued by this search and rescue operation. Lockhart telling CNN that about 7 hours ago at 3:15 local time here on the east coast of the United States, the president's national security advisor, Sandy Berger, telephoned the president, told the president that a U.S. F-117 stealth fighter was missing. The president said he wanted to be updated and informed of all of the information as soon as it became available. Berger called the president several times, including at 7 p.m. this evening as well as at 9 p.m. this evening. Lockhart tells CNN that at 9:35 this evening, p.m. Eastern Time, that would be about 15 minutes ago, the pilot, whose name is not being released yet, but we expect to get his name shortly, at 9:35 local time, Eastern Time, the pilot was picked up by this search and rescue mission. At 9:52, the team left Yugoslav airspace, was out of harm's way, and the pilot was safe. The press secretary, Joe Lockhart, saying the president is obviously very pleased at this extraordinary effort that helped to save this U.S. pilot. Frank?
All right, Wolf. Now, again, just to repeat to you, within the next 5-10 minutes, we're expecting to hear from Ken Bacon, the Pentagon spokesman. He will be stepping before the cameras, and he will tell you, our viewers, exactly what transpired, building on the detail that Joe Lockhart provided to Wolf Blitzer that you've just heard. Well, to help us better understand the situation, what has taken place, and what it means, we're joined by retired Major General Edward Atchison. He's here in our Washington studios. General, what do you make of these developments, and what's the significance of this prompt rescue?
Well, I think that now that we have the pilot back and the word has been passed both to the President and to his loving family, we have other business that we must attend to. Number one probably would be the destruction as much as we can of the remainder of that aircraft. There was a lot of highly classified material aboard and technology, and we would like to make sure that as little as possible falls into foreign hands.
How does that get done?
We could probably do it with additional strikes, possibly with Tomahawk missile, but we had to make sure that we'd recovered the pilot first and that he wouldn't have been a victim of our strikes there.
We don't want to lose sight of the fact, too, that something that Wolf said that's very significant potentially, and that is that tonight, in this wave of strikes, there was more... I'm sorry, let me stop right there because I understand Ken Bacon is coming out into the Pentagon briefing room now, and we're expecting to hear his statement.
The Hawk attack plane went down over Yugoslavia this afternoon. I'm happy to report that the pilot has been rescued and is safe at an Allied base. He and the combat search and rescue team that picked him up are all safe. I do not now have a report on his condition. That's something that we will have later, but not tonight. Unfortunately, I'm not going to give you, I'm not going to be able to give you very much detail about this incident. We do not know, for instance, what caused this plane to crash. That's one of the things we'll learn as we interview the pilot and we talk to the people who flew a mission with him. But I can stress 3 points. The first is this operation will continue. Nothing that happened today over Yugoslavia has dampened our resolve to see this operation through to its military ends. Second, we will continue to expand the target set, as NATO Secretary General Solana said today, to focus more on the forces within Kosovo, both the Yugoslav Army forces and the Special Police Forces operating in Kosovo now. And third, I'd like to stress both the bravery of the pilot and the heroism of the team that rescued him this evening. They performed in a way that should make all Americans proud. And with that, I'll take a few questions.
Ken, you say that you won't, at this point, go into the reason or the way the plane was down, but we've had indications from many that, in fact, it was shot down by a surface-taken missile. The wingmen flying with him, do they say that there was any kind of apparent missile that brought the plane down, or does it seem to be...
Ivan, this plane was reported missing at about 3 o'clock our time this afternoon. From that time until the moment we learned the pilot was safe and out of Yugoslav airspace, we have concentrated on nothing but rescuing that pilot. We will talk to the pilot, we will talk to the other people in the package in due time, but I think it's premature now to make any judgment about why this plane crashed. Yes, Dana? Dana?
Can you tell me how long he was on the ground?
I'm afraid I cannot give you any details like that, and I won't. Precisely because we have said from the very beginning that this is a perilous environment. The Serbs have a robust air defense system, and I don't say that to prejudge why this plane came down. We do not know why it came down. But there may well be other times when we have to rescue pilots, and the less said about our techniques for rescuing pilots, the better for the safety of the pilots.
Can you say which nation the rescuers came from?
I certainly cannot. They were Americans. They were Americans, and it was a joint team of several services, but I can't tell you where they launched from or where they recovered to.
What about the third report that two F-4s were shot down and the German pilot was captured? Any word on that?
We have no other confirmation of missing aircraft.
How quickly did the search and rescue teams go into operation?
Dana, that's precisely the type of detail I'm not going to get into, and we will not talk about search and rescue. As you know, these are highly trained people who can work in all environments. They can work very quickly, but it's this type of detail that we're not going to give.
Can you characterize the level of air defense resistance? Were there SAM launches tonight, for example?
I can't answer that question. Yes.
You said that you were concentrating on nothing else but the rescue of the pilots. Did it affect other missions that were scheduled tonight? Did they go off as planned or not?
Missions have been going on all day, and they're ongoing now.
No matter how the plane went down, this is an incredible sort of propaganda coup for the surge. They've been playing on TV. What does this say about the stealth fighters?
Well, first I'd point out that the Serbs have lost 5 planes, and none of those pictures have appeared on Serb TV that I'm aware of, and they certainly have not handed the pictures out to CNN and the other American networks. The point to make here is that we will continue this mission. We are undeterred by this. We knew that we were flying into a risky environment, and we will continue to fly in a way that minimizes the risk to our pilots while increasing our ability to perform our mission. And the mission is to diminish Milosevic's ability to continue his murderous ways in Kosovo. Those ways are continuing today. There are signs that he's been, in fact, they've been intensifying, and we will intensify our efforts to stop that.
Ted, are you concerned about the loss of stealth technology as a result of this time?
Well, from the pictures I saw on the television tonight, I'm not sure there's going to be much left. This is highly sophisticated technology, obviously, and it's not easy to reproduce.
But Ted, just a follow-up. I mean, if it was shot down, is there some concern about the performance of the stealth fighters?
We will continue to, first of all, we have no way of knowing yet whether it was shot down. But second, this plane has performed, has flown hundreds and hundreds of missions over Iraq through very dense air defenses. It's flown very well over the very dense, over and through the very dense air defenses in Yugoslavia, and it will continue to be a mainline plane in this operation. Richard?
Yeah, at the very least, you said what time the plane went down. Can you say what time the rescue was complete or the rescue cleared Yugoslav airspace?
No.
When will we get more details about the pilot or...
Well, probably not before tomorrow.
You say you won't talk about his condition or health?
I don't know his condition at this stage. I don't know his condition.
You said that the murderous ways of President Milosevic's forces are intensifying in Kosovo. Is there a level of frustration in this building that there is, it appears, relatively little that you could do from the air to prevent that?
I think we understood the dimensions of this challenge from the day we launched it, in fact, from well before that. We understand that, while air power is very, very effective, it cannot do everything. But what it can do is seriously degrade the military infrastructure and diminish the forces of the Yugoslav army and of the special police. And we have been concentrating on hitting special police targets, including headquarters, operating depots, supply areas, and also Yugoslav army targets in the same categories, and we will turn increasingly to dealing with forces in the field and the infrastructure necessary to support them.
Is the pilot completely uninjured? Is he completely all right?
I can't comment on his, I can't say that he's completely uninjured, but we'll just have to wait for details on that.
Can you tell us anything about the mission, the destination of this F-117 when it went down?
It was performing a mission under Operation Allied Force to bomb targets in Yugoslavia. That's all I can tell you.
No more steps.
No. Yes, Martha?
You can't say whether or not this expanded air campaign has begun or not. What NATO talked about today, broadening the target. Has that already begun? Might that stealth have taken part in that, or has it not begun?
As I pointed out, the short answer is the approval came after this mission was planned, after today's missions were planned, and we'll begin seeing the expansion in the days ahead. But as I pointed out yesterday, the percentage of targets, of VJ and MUP targets, special police targets in Kosovo, has been expanding every day as the mission has been going on, and that will continue. Thank you very much.
So their official word from the Pentagon spokesman Ken Bacon that this pilot has been rescued and that he and the team that went in after him are all safe at an Allied Air Force base in an undisclosed location. Ken Bacon said the Pentagon and military planners do not know what caused the crash of this F-117 and pointedly declined to speculate or declined to give any information, saying that for the several hours, and it's just about an hour ago, by the way, that pilot was in fact actually picked up. That's how fast events have been unfolding here this evening. But for the entire time that plane went down and until the pilot was rescued, the safety of that pilot and the forces, the joint forces that went in to rescue him were the sole focus of Pentagon and military planners. Back over to Wolf Blitzer now. Wolf, your take on Ken Bacon's comments?
Well, he wanted to send a message to the Yugoslav government that this incident, the loss of this F-117A stealth fighter is not going to slow down the NATO-led operation, is not going to stop the air campaign, which today entered phase 2, going after specific ground targets in Kosovo of the Yugoslav military and police forces, accused by the United States and the other NATO allies of engaging in stepped-up atrocities against the Kosovars, the ethnic Albanians. He said this operation will continue, and he also said this operation will continue to expand. Namely, the targets will be, the list of potential targets will be expanded. It's interesting, Frank, about 1 hour ago, 9:35 Eastern Time, the pilot of the F-117A was picked up. Some 17 minutes later, at 9:52 Eastern Time, he and the rescue team were out of Yugoslav airspace in a safe location, undisclosed at this point. This is the most sensitive kind of information involving the U.S. military search and rescue operations. That's why for some 6 or 7 hours, there was a stone silence from the U.S. and NATO officials as far as the downing of this F-117A.
Well, from the words of Ken Bacon, this mission will continue, and this mission is to diminish the Milosevic's murderous ways. Planners throughout the NATO operation have expressed concern bordering on alarm at what they regard as escalating atrocities that may be taking place within Kosovo. One of the difficulties with it is they're unable to confirm independently many of the reports that they are getting. However, there is an increased stream of refugees, and the reports surrounding their movements and the movements of the special forces inside Kosovo have a striking consistency to them. Back to General Atchison. General, based on what you heard from Ken Bacon, and again, he did not want to get into any kind of discussion about what caused this crash, but what the question to you is, what should take place now?
Well, I think probably the next most important thing is to get right into a quick operational analysis of exactly what happened on that flight. We don't know whether it was a technical failure or whether it was hostile action that brought that aircraft down. And certainly we don't want to have another plane brought down in the same way. So we've got to very quickly get an idea as to whether there was some mistake on our part or some advantage that the opposition was able to mount. But we want to make sure that that we get that very quickly and zero in as closely as we can because we have to continue these operations. It's not something that can wait for a long period of time of study. So it's got to be very quickly done and come up with fast answers, and they've got to be right.
And what Bacon said, General, is that now that they've got the pilot out, they can start interviewing him and others who are on that mission.
That's extremely important.
And what do they determine exactly?
Well, they'll determine as to what kind of practices we're following, what altitude he was operating at, what his direction was, where he was, what we knew about the hostile environment on the ground. Was he going over known SAM launcher sites, or was it some area which we thought was relatively clean? All those things will come into consideration there. And so there's an awful lot of work, and people will be going round the clock to come up with the answers to this.
General, I want to ask you one other question before we move on, and that is not specifically related to this plane, but related to this phase 2 of this operation. The other thing that Ken Bacon said in that briefing, and that is that what military targeters are doing now increasingly is going after these special police forces and those inside Kosovo who've been implicated with these alleged atrocities that are taking place. Can you talk about what the nature of that kind of mission is? And sometimes they may be talking about relatively small groups of people.
Indeed, and it's a far more diffuse kind of operation. The aircraft will have to be going lower. They'll have to be taking on a lot of targets that they weren't particularly prepared for or particularly briefed on. There will be a lot of police units and internal security units, and we're not exactly sure where they are. And if they're in towns and villages, of course, we'll have to go on by without hitting them for fear of creating additional collateral damage or injuring the people that we're trying to protect. So here comes the most complex part of the war.
And General, back to the rescue of this pilot for just a minute as we see these pictures of the wreckage. There, of course, is always speculation as to what impact a crash like this, the obvious casualty of war, actually has on public opinion, on those who are serving in the armed forces. A rescue has to have a different kind of impact, but an impact nonetheless.
Absolutely, but these teams know exactly what they're doing. They're exceedingly well trained, and the spirit is very high. They have no mission except to get their man, and they're out to get them with great determination. They know that they could be in that same situation at any time, and there's enormous spirit behind their organization.
General Atchison, thanks very much. Be back to you and to Wolf Blitzer, but now back to Joey in Atlanta.
Frank, throughout the some 4+ hours that we have been following up on this incident, the initial report that came more than 4 hours ago on Serbian television, there's been quite a bit of silence at NATO headquarters in Brussels. That was broken just about the same time that Pentagon spokesman Ken Bacon came to the microphones in Washington. Let's turn now to Brussels and CNN's Mike Fetzer there for what he's heard. Mike.
Well, Joey, the silence makes sense now. If they would have admitted that the plane had been shot down, then they would have had to answer questions about the whereabouts of the pilot. And up until an hour ago, he was still roaming around Yugoslavia. So it all makes sense now. It was a completely different scenario than we've had before. They've immediately denied other shoot-downs. This one, we waited and waited and waited. They said they were trying to get us information. Eventually they did, Joey.
Mike, you have particular experience with this. You covered Captain Scott O'Grady when his plane crashed during the Bosnia-Herzegovina conflict. I wonder if you can talk to us a little bit about the rescue operation in that particular case, reminding us of really the harrowing time that Scott O'Grady had waiting for his rescuers.
Well, just by coincidence of timing, I was on the USS Kearsarge when Captain O'Grady was shot down. And at that point, the ship went on alert, the Kearsarge, which is a combination of a pocket aircraft carrier and an amphibious assault vehicle, basically. Underneath are hovercraft, on top are Harriers and assault aircraft. They went to alert. They took us off the ship, brought us back on later. When they got him, we talked to these people. I had interviewed these Marines, these recon Marines, who were gung-ho. There were 2 teams on this ship. They were in the Adriatic. When they got the word where O'Grady was, after several days, they went into these helicopters with attack helicopter support. They found the location, landed. There was air cover above them, fighter jets, other smaller helicopters. They